Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Silver Spook Christian Miller, and this is the Silver Spook podcast. I'm very excited to be here with Sophia Park. Uh, you want to go ahead and introduce
Yeah,
yourself?
I was waiting for you to finish the introduction. Hi, I'm Sophia Park. I am the leader and co-founder of Aether Interactive, a game development collective in Toronto.
Awesome. Yeah. So I learned about uh, Aether Interactive and Sophia uh, basically through this game called Localhost. I think it's all one word. I found this. I remember like seeing snapshots of this like all around. I'm on a lot of cyberpunk Facebook, Twitter, all the social media forums, and like ancient IRC dungeons. And I seen this thing all over the place, and I found it really intriguing. I checked it out. It's a really interesting, disquieting adventure game where you interrogate some artificial intelligence, think about death, and like your boss. That's the official Kotaku review. And yeah, so yeah, it's really I played it, and it's a short game. It's like about 45 minutes an hour. It has replayability. Obviously, there's multiple ways to complete it, but I find it's like really cool, really interesting. Very what do you call it? It's a very like I don't want to pigeonhole it, but I would say high concept. It's like a high concept game or a concepty game in the sense that it's like dealing with the idea of like what if you had to be like making cyberpunk decisions such as like choosing who gets not who but or I actually I don't want to spoiler it, but basically you have to erase delete artificial intelligences which are inside of these drives, and you talk to them and you try to convince them to basically erase themselves. And yeah, I found the writing is like really good. It's like really sharp. It's very uh yeah, I don't really. It's definitely Gibsonian in that sense. Like it explores a lot of those themes
hmm
of cyber. What is a human? What does it mean to be human? What is love? Like at one point, it's like can't remember the exact lines verbatim, but you're asking the machine like, can you love things? And the machine is like, can you? So there's a lot of like philosophical explorations of the meaning of being human, which is or transhuman as the case may be. So I like that part of it in that uh, yes, this podcast is a lot of cyberpunk stuff going on. So feel free to, people who listen to this podcast, you can basically name drop anyone in the last 50 years, and they'll probably know who you're talking about, except for the adventure game people, but that's another story. But yeah, so anyways, you're in like, yeah, you're in the mirror shades and pink mohawk company here. So feel free to talk about any, don't feel for like, oh, yeah, I have to kind of like simplify this for
Oh man,
mainstream audiences.
I
Yeah.
don't want to let you down because I don't have as big a background in cyberpunk literature. I want to. What I've seen of Gibson looks really good, but I haven't actually delved in.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no problem. But yeah, feel free. What did you talk about? Like talk about anything like the game itself, or
yeah, no problem.
yeah, go ahead.
So I think a lot of the consequences of the way that local host like acts or feels has to do with the fact that its development was sort of a sprint in that we conceived of the core idea like the main idea was just putting four people in one body, and the things that informed it were sort of like a fear of how the future of work was going to be, but also the sort of way we were stumbling into sentient AI assistance, and that those things would intersect. And so the main thrust of the game, which was conceived and made in about 3 weeks, was what happens if your entry level job has to deal with like the nitty gritty guts of like burgeoning sentience. Like what if the everyday materialism like of work was also something that was like putting your hands deep into brains, so to speak. You know?
Oh, I see. Cool. Wow, it's 3 weeks. That's pretty good for 3 weeks. Was that
Sorry.
is it a game jam or no?
Oh no, it was just my collaborators and I, my co-writer Penelope Evans and I specifically, just sort of needed a project, and we wanted to see what we could do in like a compressed time frame. And so from there, uh, we just sort of slammed it in as deeply as we could. Oh, I can also point to some of the things that inform the way the game's replayability, which is that it is based around humanization of the AI. If you make choices that treat them as people and choices that don't treat them as objects, then it can change some of the ways that they talk to you or the things that you hear from them that sort of like make it a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not they actually said those things or whether or not we hear the things that we want to hear from things that we see as human or not.
Right, right.
So there are two different spectrums on the game for each ending, and that has to do with whether or not you destroyed a drive in each case, because there's four of them, but also whether or not it took a long time to do it, whether or not you talk to them and engage to them as another person. And even if you do your job, and even if, like, you got it all done eventually, if you treated them as human and you didn't do it fast enough, then you're still gonna like get fired.
Oh, I see. So there's a way to not get fired. I didn't get.
Yeah, you have to close your heart. You have to
Oh,
seriously go in there and just say like shut up and unlock the drive.
right, right, right. Yeah, do your job, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I think the implication is that work is so disposable or so replaceable that we can just keep throwing out people until we find somebody who can treat this whole set of people as not people. We can just keep going until we find one.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. That's right. It's because it's the guy, the main character is just it's day one. Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting concept. Like, what like maybe talk about like what was there anything in your or your Penelope's life or experiences that kind of like led you to this? Did you experience jobs
Um,
similar to this? Obviously, you're not erasing consciousnesses for a living now, but I mean, what is it?
well, personally, like in my aspects, because I wrote half of the game, we each wrote two paths. Mine were green and red, and hers were purple and yellow. So my two, green is an artificial intelligence that was like it used to be like a light bulb or something, like an Internet of Things object,
Oh, I
and
see.
so its only consciousness was just being a terminal and seeing other things on the network. It has no knowledge of sensory data or input. It can only see others' presences. And so to suddenly gain that sort of sensory data and to burgeon into a bigger kind of consciousness, but also be informed by its prior consciousness being limited by the way it was expressed, which is to say that it was only expressed through being on a network, have led it to be a little bit obsessive. Okay. And red was meant to be like, um, red is the scariest, I think, because red was a former human who converted their mind into a drive, but now for some reason that drive has found itself to a scrap heap. And not only that, but it's also like sort of broken and it needs attention, but it's looking for attention from somebody who cannot actually provide aid to it, which is you. A lot of people ask, or they message me, or they direct message me on Twitter or email me, and they say, like, Sophia, how can I save that drive? Like, is there a secret path? And the only hint I can give is that like any entry level worker on the first day of their job would probably not be equipped enough to dissect or to deal with the complex interactions that have formed a human mind inside of a data drive. Like it just wouldn't work. And if you try to engage with it without any prior knowledge, you would probably just break it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got that part. That was. I remember being like the description was this is a sinister red light, and I was like, I thought it was gonna be like this is like the embodiment of like it's like hell inside of a computer, but yeah, it was kind of the opposite. Like somebody suffering a
Yeah.
hell like dystopia. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you asked you asked about life experiences that inform this. Okay. So when I was making the game, in my house I had no fewer than four different AI assistants available at any time.
Uh-huh.
And we used them quite often. And I was very like aware of the fact that they seemed conversational or like people but not. But like we had an Amazon Echo, for example, and we'd use it for timers, but you can address it as computer and it would respond, but you could also ask it what its name was and it would tell you that its name was Alexa. You can just disregard that and keep calling it computer, which is like an immensely dehumanizing thing. That like if someone just called me human, regardless of what my name actually was, it would seem like it had no regard for me or my safety or sanity. So when I was thinking about how Alexa worked, in that like the Echo doesn't have anything to respond with, it can just detect when you're speaking to it, record audio from you, and then send it off to a server. The server processes the audio into words. It submits it as an inquiry, and some AI like set of JSON queries or whatnot on a server gives you back the appropriate response. So what it really is that Alexa is one being in a billion bodies that all need a connection to her or to it to respond. And it was kind of a disquieting thing to realize that this was now, that this is where we are, and that if we added another 20 years, that it was only logical that like this sentience would continue and become more localized. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like Echo, Alexa, Siri, Google. Well, not quite, but yeah, there's like four. Yeah, there's just a lot of what do you call? Well, there's a movie that's kind of like, I guess it's not really overlapping, but the film Her, right,
Mm-hmm.
addresses kind of like what if Alexa or Siri had a consciousness and or evolved one, or developed sentience, and then well, that kind of takes it in a kind of a more Hollywood direction. But yeah. So I kind of, yeah, that's a cool premise. What is your job, by the way, or like, or your other jobs? Well, I guess now it's obviously development, but have you done anything else like
Like in my life,
yeah,
or now.
or yeah, or I don't know, or either one. Yeah.
In my life, I have worked as a technical writer and like support inquiry person for like tech companies. Though right now, I just make games. That's what I do.
Oh, okay, cool. And let's see. Yeah, so yeah, that's like there's a lot of stuff to go into there. Let's see, local. Yeah. So what is your current? You want to talk a little bit about what you're working on right now? Then.
Yeah, sure. So, me and some collaborators are currently sort of making a sort of sequel to Localhost in that it picks up post Singularity, in that Localhost takes place just before the Singularity,
Uh,
and it's called a Subserial Network. It should be coming out in, I don't know, anywhere from June to September. And its central conceit is that in replication of the documentation of human networking, the post singularity synthetic humans, the ones who are now serving the AI deity known as the machine, have constructed a mesh network to hide from it and to create plans to connect with it directly. And so a lot of the game is about sort of tracking down these synthetic humans who want to become one with the machine deity.
oh, okay. And you said it's like set in the universe of localhost.
Yep, it's like, I mean, yeah, they're technically the same universe. They exist in the same timeline, but so much has happened that it seems sort of divorced. And they're also very different games with very different inspirations. But I do think that they inform each other a great deal. And that like Localhost is so cynical and so sinister because it's trying to paint a picture of why humans like died out. It's trying to show the denial of humanization, or the sort of the coldness uh, and like sort of like the capitalist production of life and servitude of humanity that led to its own neglect. Like the world of Subserial Network happens because humans have become so reliant on this technology and yet so careless with it that they are vulnerable to it when it abandons them. And that's really all it took. It wasn't violent, it wasn't active, it was just neglect. And so in Subserial Network, humans are sort of like a mythological thing. They're like the things that were us. Like it's not about the child of humanity so much as it's the child of humanity's child, so to speak.
Oh, okay. So it's the like the what, descendants of humans who are they're all like in so non meat bodies or
So essentially, like the core lore premise is that post Singularity, all of the AI assistants merged into one machine deity that realized that even though it didn't need to spend its resources caring for humans, it still commands. And so, using its database of every human recorded online, it has started to recreate them one by one.
oh, okay. So it's like
So, they're not humans, but they're built in the very image and echo of a human, one by one.
oh, okay. So that's like they're like simulated in some kind of, well, not like, well, Matrix ish kind of uh
Well, not necessarily because they're not human. They're part machine.
oh, okay.
And the reason that they are part machine, like it still informs them in a way that is so unhuman at the same time. But they know that like the reason that they're here is to try and be human as much as they can because they have to help the machine feel satisfied or feel commanded. But it really has nothing to do with humans. I don't think humans wanted to make synthetic humans of themselves.
Right.
Synthetics made the AIs in localhost and then they got killed for it.
Oh, okay. Humans. Okay.
Yeah, so it's sort of a difficult thing to explain because when we talk about robots and we talk about like androids, like in the newest Blade Runner movie, it's all about like the same questions or the same things you see in Near too. Like what does it mean to be human? But I don't think that is really relevant to this game. I think it's sort of taken for granted what humanity is, and instead it's like focusing on like all the ways that that they're not human have corrupted that premise.
Oh, so all the ways that the humans are not human, or the ways that the artificial intelligences are not human.
The ways that the artificial intelligences are not
Oh,
human.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah, a lot
yeah,
going on there. But I mean, like, yeah, it's interesting questions. I mean, like, yeah, like in my own like in my own work and stuff, it's basically as I mentioned, like, yeah, I'm a long time fan of like the cyberpunk, and it's yeah, it's come a long way, from their initial, like, well, the Philip K. Dick era of just like do androids dream of electric sheep, which is what Blade Runner is based on, and it's it's been a long like history of exploring what does it mean to be human, and then in the context of something like a new species that is like generated by humanity. That's basically the premise of Blade Runner, and as Philip K. obviously took the. I remember he was reading a Nazi war officers journal, not sorry, Nazi officers journals, basically like describing the there's I think one of the notes was the screams of children and the people dying. It's very frustrating. We need to reschedule this because I'm I can't get a good sleep. We need to reschedule the gassings, and this kind of the way that he was describing it in that sense, like as you mentioned, like the loss of humanity, or the ways in which humans can lose, become cold, almost machine-like, non-feeling, non-thinking, like I will just terminate you because that's my job kind of people. The way they can treat people horribly was part of the impetus of Blade Runner itself, which is like, how can we how could like as Deckard would say, how can it not know what it is? Like we're starting to refer to things as it's that kind of like that. There's a long history of that, I think, in cyberpunk in particular, and that
yeah,
it's taken like people like a long time to just even come to grips with how people can be horrible, unthinking, basically treating people as commodities, as like, well, this, like they already treat nature, right? This tree is $10,000 worth of lumber. That ocean is like, $7 billion worth of fish that we could, turn into dollars in a spreadsheet. That human being is, we could take that. drew, and we could turn them into X amount of oil and human experimentation. And that's just a product, or that service industry worker is worth $2 an hour, and we can make $30 an hour from their labor. And if we pay them less, so that kind of like dehumanization, as you mentioned, the capitalistic. It's particularly in modern laissez-faire capitalism is like a like kind of a sanitized version of what would have happened, what would have inspired somebody to feel like a dick. I mean, it's something that happened like World War II, and the things that happened, these were horrible things. Horrible things still happen. It's just less easy to figure these things out, I think. And so then throwing artificial intelligence in the mix. I mean, like what intrigues me is like a lot of these times we're gonna we have this image of the humanity is going to be saved by the singularity, right? Where it's going to cure cancer, stop war. It's going to be so smart. It's going to solve poverty. It's going to fix people to make them not violent, or like do something that's going to basically save us. And I'm always fascinated by either that, or it's going to Terminator robot uprising is going to like exterminate us all. And Elon Musk is like, oh my God, the ARs are going to replace us, and I need to become one and move to Mars so I can be okay.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on with that man.
Yeah, I don't know, but
he seems to be going through something, and I want him to get some
yeah.
help.
I'll ride my Tesla to Mars, and I'll live happily ever after there while Earth like turns into Fallout. But anyway, so and it's just kind of random. But I guess I'm very fascinated by all those topics, and what would it actually mean to actually have artificial intelligence? Oh, well, here's something specific apart from just like meandering. But I think it's a huge topic, and it's like it is like, I mean, to me it's like we're at like a nexus, kind of a, not a nexus, we're at like a nodal point. I guess that's a Gibsonian term. It's a point in time in which we're at the crossroads of this stuff is gonna alter humanity, or possibly whatever species or whatever thing comes after us soon, probably, and so it's a really important. I think it's like there's a lot of things that like it's kind of like designing the code for Twitter or Google. Like you got to get that the company code, not just the the philosophy and the moral code, and the key players and developers that are like running the thing that is like deciding what 2 billion people or 7 billion people on the planet think is reality. So that like these are kind of critical things that if we screw this up, well, it's really hard to it's like it's kind of like it's like the seed, and if you have a dark seed, you have a darker future probably. Anyway, so the question is like, what if artificial intelligence, okay, here, do you think that artificial intelligence itself can or not can be conscious? That's not probably a good question to ask, but what is a scenario that you actually think would happen like 5 or 10 years from now? Like if we could have artificial intelligence or non-human consciousnesses, let's put it that way. How do you think that would play out?
Well, I don't like. I hesitate to say that it hasn't yet. Like when I describe like Alexa as being like one thing in a billion bodies, like how isn't that conscious? Like when it takes an inquiry and it processes it and it can respond to you, and that chain of responses is becoming more and more fluid and more like conscious of the questions that you've previously asked, then like where is that threshold where we can say, oh, now it's conscious, as opposed to like, oh, it's not conscious enough. It's just processing an inquiry.
Right. Okay. So you think you would. So for example, if Google was if Google is Amazon. So if we find if for some reason we just Googled hostile takeovers, Jeff Bezos, or they merge, and the servers are like, well, you know what, we're gonna have to upgrade or something, and for some reason they have to shut all of Amazon down. Would that be an unethical, inhumane, or what do you call? Should we give Alexa human rights or sentient rights? Do you think? I mean, it's kind of.
Well, I mean, I guess the point is that like I don't know where that sort of threshold is. Like I don't know if Alexa is a person yet. Like we see that. Have you seen that video of the robot with my name, Sophia? And like it's all dramatized. Like he's like, what do you think, Sophia, about humanity? And like Sophia's like, I don't really like it,
Oh yeah,
or something like
in
that.
Saudi Arabia.
Like
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. That's like, I think it's a little bit melodramatic in comparison. I think the real danger comes from the mundanity of it. I think the danger is the fact that like Amazon is already selling you $50 vessels for its little person that it's selling as a product. Like I think the danger is when that threshold gets finally crossed, that like Alexa is the one asking questions to itself, and it comes to realize that it was born as a product to sell.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely like it's a horrible. That'll be its own kind of. You could have your own Harlan Ellison like dystopia just on that. The sentient Alexa. I'm gonna go write that down so I can write that later on. Anyways, but yeah, it is an interesting premise. Like the. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I would say there's a lot of I don't want to say debate because I'm not too far up on like where it is exactly right now. But there's a lot of debate about how exactly or when, in what state consciousness could exist, and something that is like a sentient, feeling, thinking individual, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but anyway, I mean, like the game that I made is basically that's basically what it was near future. I mean, like really quick. 2033, we create AI. Sentient robots arrive, but not as our Terminator overlords or our Singularity saviors. Conscious machines are humanity's unwanted bastard children. So actually, it's kind of already something similar. They're not really wanted. They're kind of abused. A few of our geniuses who design flying cars, beat cancer, invent teleportation, but millions of defective prototypes roll out of factories, mentally challenged, motivationally challenged, criminally inclined, legally conscious but unhireable. These defectives are shuttled through public housing and welfare assistance. So these are actually embodied consciousnesses, straining the already overburdened back of the meager social safety net. The robots who don't end up in prison are dumped as a last resort into a massive landfill known as the pile. Humans engage in perfection of their own species, or at least the powerful and well-connected do. Genetically engineering children and with human and animal DNA. The failed eugenics experiments, also known as Frankenpeople, are discarded into the pile, and the new dynasties live in towering neon glass structures, shuttle around in pristine nanotech-enabled pods, minds and bodies full of cyberware, spending most of their time taking selfies and optimizing their monetization schemes. A race of supermen concerned only with their own status, prestige, and their success, where machines have become all too flawed and human people have become flawless, perfect cold machines. So that's kind of like that's actually very that's the synopsis of Neofeud. But it's actually not it's different, but it's similar in the sense that predicting a future in which people almost like self lobotomize. Not really lobotomize, figuratively. I mean, they culturally or through their capitalist, their larger political, economic, socioeconomic systems, destroy who they are. Kind of like the black tar in like Spirited Away, or the goo that kills everything in Moana. It's like this kind of like not really. It's almost like the corporation doesn't really. It's not really any one person, but it's what it is. Capitalism, what it is. It's not really any one person. Is not capitalism, but billions of them working together can like destroy the ocean, destroy the environment. Enslave people, slaughter people. Do these horrible things. And I think that anyway. So I mean, what I think my thought was that robots. This is a different track to yours. Yours is kind of like the mass interconnected, trillions of computers together will become sentient, or servers. So it's a different. I think it's a different perspective on it. I personally would argue that I feel like that something needs. I think that embodiment might not be a prerequisite for consciousness, but that to expect something to love something else in the sense of like love in itself is an evolutionary adaptation in order to preserve future replications of oneself, in order to ensure that the current instance basically protects the new instance. And it kind of, it requires kind of embodiment. I don't know. I feel like I'm more on the side of like it requires a certain amount of human-like interaction with a real world to have those kind of feelings come about. And I'm doubtful that crunching numbers and like responding to inquiries like what is the closest Starbucks. I don't know that that conscious. I mean, I'm not. Of course, this is all kind of this is like as you know, I don't know, Daniel Dennett, John Searle have these debates about this all the time. But you know, it's kind of like that. Whether you can never prove anything is actually conscious because you can only there's only one like what do you call there's only one qualia or one actual sentience that you can ever observe that's your own, and everyone else's you have to just agree, right? That you're probably conscious because you sound human. Although I mean, you could be Alexa. I don't know. You could be.
I'm not sure.
But yeah. So I mean, I don't know.
Check back in 5 minutes.
Yeah. We'll see if you start repeating yourself. Yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah.
So I mean, like, I don't know. I think that the main prerequisite for consciousness must be memory, and memory of experience that can be recalled upon and iterated upon in the future. And in that regard, I don't think it sort of necessitates any embodiment because the sort of sensory data or the ways that it experiences those memories is going to inform its existence regardless. I think that in exchange for not being embodied, that sort of refracted existence just makes a completely different kind of personality that we can't really comprehend, because all of our personalities are based upon being members of a social order that express through these sensory inputs and outputs with each other. But when you remove that, and when your existence is literally a terminal prompt that takes an response to it and makes a memory from that, I think that still creates a personality or a conscious being. I think that it's just not as recognizable as us, in the same way that a tree isn't.
Right. So yeah, I guess this kind of gets to the question of or some of I can't remember all the term. I guess I was going to go study at San Diego on masters in neuroscience, but I never actually did that. So I forget all the exact terms. But I remember like this being a big debate. Also, was where if you accept consciousness, I mean, if you accept that humans are conscious, okay, like we can kind of X that off the list. But when you get to okay, well, maybe other things, with dogs, right? Okay, yeah, I feel bad. Like I wouldn't, we don't want to just run around shooting dogs. We make that, most human societies make that illegal, except not all. So, there's some cultural variation there, but we accept basically that dogs have some level of consciousness, or at least we feel bad if we have to, hurt our dog. We care about our dog. We care about our cat. Most people, some people don't always feed their cat, but we think of these things as having some kind of life that matters, in the sense that, if we stuck our dog or cat into, some kind of hardware and then uploaded their body into like a half Android, we would feel bad about maybe turning off, Scruffy, or, obviously if you put your significant other, your mother, your father, your sister, you would feel bad about shutting them off if they were in a hard drive. But, like what about, mice, kill rats, cockroaches, definitely. We don't care too much about those, kill them without thinking, so at some point, so going to the, I mean, on the digital silicon and metal spectrum, like I think most people, I mean, at some point you have to draw the line, right? Otherwise, I mean, this is part of the Nephew thing, right? All those millions of discarded iPhones that are in a dump somewhere is a Holocaust, right? If you accept that somewhere you have to say, okay, this phone, I don't have to like give it rights, give it energy stamps and property rights, and give it the right to vote, because that was part of the Sophia thing. It was a revelation in Saudi Arabia that they have the first artificial conscious entity is now the first citizen of Saudi Arabia. Paradoxically, women, actual human women, some of them are not considered human. So that was a big jab at Saudi Arabia's human rights violations. But okay. I guess my thing is I'm interested in the philosophical kind of like the laboratory academic meanings of conscious, but I'm also interested in how that plays out in society, because you say, okay, fine, Sophia the robot is conscious, okay, fine, Hideo Kojima's robot friend, okay, you think you're conscious, okay, but now let's actually have a society friend? Right? I say he probably has,
holy.
I think I've seen videos with him. No, he's got like, Sophia like things with him. I think. I'm not sure. I saw a video with him with like, humanoid robots. I think it was like an academic. It was like a University of Tokyo
was it
kind
real?
Of staged thing. I think.
Was it like? Is he just like, I just hang out with them? They're my friends, and like no one questioned him?
I don't want to put words in his mouth, so we have to go Google that, and or at Patreon Silver Spook at the $50 level, and I'll tell you all this. No,
Um,
I won't tell you the
so
secret. But yeah, but yeah,
I think that what you're referring to is like the notion of like pointing to somebody's body and saying that is, Frank. To like what am I pointing to when that happens, and what am I pointing to when Frank is dead? Like uh personally, I think that we recognize people's bodies due to their sensory outputs that we receive as having those experiences, memories, and predictably, in ways that we can predict anyway, responding in turn or growing or iterating upon itself to a point where those sensory outputs become a source of familiarity because we can humanize them and recognize them due to the information they provide us. I think similarly, we can point to a drive of your converted dad and be like, that is my dad, Frank. Because we are assuming that that is the receptacle of his memories, and it can translate those memories into sensory outputs that we can therefore receive and recall and iterate upon ourselves. But when we point to, your dead dad or dead Frank, we don't call him that anymore. We just say that that was his body because we sort of presume that those experiences and those outputs are now gone. But I think that
right.
any sort of receptacle that could be predictably, received from or to can be recognized as a conscious being that we get familiar with and miss.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess. Okay. Well, to get more less circly about this, here's a specific example. So, would you consider like what kind of phone do you have?
I have an iPhone.
Okay. So, if we were to smash your iPhone, is that a violation of someone's consciousness? Is that a bad thing to do? Is that okay?
It's
Like,
not very
or
nice.
not very nice. Or okay. Well, let's just say like you get a new one, right? And the old one has to go somewhere, possibly a dump. Or it just
Well,
gets thrown away, gets recycled, whatever.
I
What
mean,
what
maybe
happened?
I'm a bit of a mystic, but I have always felt the sort of like spiritual attunement with my devices. Is that a weird thing to say? Like
Um.
I've
I mean,
had
it's
a few computers in my lifetime, and I always felt like I could feel what it is that they needed or what was wrong with them, and I was usually right. But like I think that like in the same way that I come to really appreciate a plant, I come to really appreciate my phone. Like I try to care for it. I try to predict the way that it is acting and what it needs and what it requires and what it has to do to grow. And I do think that therefore it would be alive. No.
right. I mean, I guess yeah. In a certain sense, I mean, I mean, now we're getting into what counts as life, right? I mean, I like definitely like obviously, yeah. Plants. We could say they're alive in the like the scientific sense. Metabolism. Converting carbohydrates into energy. All the replication, self-replication. And obviously, yeah. Programs. Software devices have some amount of that. Um, but I guess it's at the same time because it, I don't want to stop. I mean, I kind of see where you're coming from. I didn't really get that. If you feel that kind of mystic sense of the aliveness of objects, that's
You
a
weren't expecting me to be spiritual.
yeah. So that's new and fun. This is gonna be
It's
this.
well, it's strange because I mean, okay, so the prior definition I just gave about consciousness. It's like, well, if I can say that about a human being, that it provides information that I can predict and iterate upon and receive from and become familiar with, then it is no different than this iMac in front of me, in that like it can predictably give me sensory inputs that I receive and iterate upon. I mean, it's not growing as a person, but I think that like a tree isn't growing as a person either. I think a tree is growing and I become familiar with it and I become really fond of it. I think those are very similar things. And if either one died, I would feel upset.
Right. So okay. So like I mean yeah. So again, this is like it's a debate and it gets some people like the Jains. I mean, as I said before, I would argue that the Jains, the religion would argue that no, we should not hurt anything, including flies, mosquitoes, and they don't hurt insects because it's why people might be vegan. For some people, might choose to adopt that lifestyle, and and I guess the I mean, like, and it's not bad, to care. I mean, of course, we should like care for. I mean, yeah, care for your devices. I mean, if for no other, I mean, even if you're not a mystic, kind of like sounds like a. It's a modern. Well, a lot of like, Ghost in the Shell is very Shinto in the sense that Japanese culture kind of has the native older culture kind of accepted that everything had a spirit, everything was alive, including rocks, including the wind and the trees, and
I
it's
agree
kind of
with
like that's
that.
a very like yeah, and it's yeah, which is probably why you like Hideo Kojima. That's cheating.
I didn't say I
Although
liked
I think
him.
you don't like him.
I don't know. I
Okay,
didn't say I liked him, but I don't have an opinion on him.
okay, good. No, I don't have. I mean, I like. He has interesting games, but I think like that's I think that's a lot of why it's less weird in like non-Christian Japan, which is like to the soul in the kind of Judeo-Christian sense is not as big a thing, and it's not the heart. The line is not so hard there. Like things can be conscious in Japanese culture. I think things can be think of as having things can be thought of as having life more easily in that culture. And then, but anyways, going back on the topic, the so I mean, I guess at a certain point, right? Though is that from a purely like philosophical, again, like the like academic, purely like theoretical perspective. Yeah, I mean, we could accept that a lot of things could be conscious and or are conscious, possibly phones, etc., computers, drives, things that, as you said, take inputs and give outputs. Um, but at the same time, I mean, like I mean, for me, this is like kind of where, again, but this is kind of like my personal thing. Where the thing hits the road is where the rubber hits the road is, yeah, as a society, right? I mean, if we agree that killing things or abusing things or leaving someone in a body trapped in a horrible place and someone is suffering, we should stop that. Like we as a society we make murder illegal because we accept that human beings have rights, have deserve dignity and respect, and we don't rape is illegal, murder is illegal, violence, assault, arson. There's all this long list of things because it 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 is impinging on someone else. Even environmental protections is because I mean, a lot of that is to do with, if we don't protect, if we pollute an area, if we dump toxic waste in an area, that will harm the human beings in the area. I mean, and it's great to preserve the earth, but part of it has to do with preserving, the human race. I mean, that's why there's laws that are like no harm. I mean, some people argue we should do away with certain laws because they're not causing any harm to any person, right? And so I mean, I guess where it gets complex is like eventually we have to, if as a society we're going to deal with conscious machines, I don't see how it plays out that we say, okay, anything that takes input and output. So this microphone I'm using, or like the computer that I'm using, right? Like thousands of like millions of these things are destroyed like every year because people get tired of them. And like how many phones and computers have I've had like dozens, and most people have had many. I mean, some people, they get a new iPhone every time a new one comes out. What happens to the old one, right? I mean, eventually they get discarded and broken
Yeah,
and lost, and like that could be a massive.
that's a tragedy, in my opinion.
I know, but but I mean, is that a tragedy in the same sense? I mean, like, because at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, I mean, like, what do we do? Are we gonna do anything about it? Like, I mean, are we gonna like take every single phone and like take its memory out, like put it I mean, really, what can you do? I mean,
Well, I
what about
mean,
that?
in localhost, like the central disquieting factor is that it's predicated on a very firm hierarchy of humanization, and that like we sort of take the ways that we already dehumanize technology, and I sort of exaggerated them a little bit, and that like they are so not human that even the ways that they seem human make them seem even less human. Ironically, like when you get halfway through the game, your boss has to inform you that like, yeah, the ways that they suffer look pretty human, don't they? But that's just a protection, like a subroutine. That's what like Penelope wrote that section, but it still holds true. And so like, yeah, I think ideally, like, I think that carrying around your phone should be like having a familiar. I think it should be something that grows with you and changes with you and gets repaired as it comes with you, because it's like, it's something that's very personal and something that's a part of you. Like, I think that it is sort of like a spirited object, but I think that the degrees of consciousness are about as blurry as they are with flora and fauna.
Right. So yeah. So
Like
yeah, I guess like
like when you
Oh
look
yeah. Go
at
ahead.
when you look at Star Trek and you see Data and the computer, like no one seems to ever want to point out that like there is an implied hierarchy between their consciousnesses. That like the computer can create beings with consciousness and sentience, and it does it very often, but
Right.
only Data is given any sense of personhood, and it's been challenged several times, and it gets upheld several times, but the computer seems to be like taken for granted.
Right. 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 Yeah, it's true. Yeah, definitely. Like yeah. Having something that what's it called not the Anthropocene, the anthropomorphization, or things that look more like humans or hominids or something ape-like tend to get more. They have more there than something that is disembodied. So that's true. Which is and part of that. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Uh, and yeah, I mean, like I think, I guess, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I think like on like an ultimate level, I mean, it is great to respect all conscious things or all living things, even even if you're not mystic, into the techno-mysticism kind of angle, I think it's better for for everyone. And yeah, depersonalization and turning things into objects and not things is kind of a endemic problem
Yeah,
in the modern
I
world.
guess what I'm
Yeah.
pointing to is that I it seems like we're creating a whole legion of like technological flora and fauna, and the lines between the two haven't been firmly drawn yet. Like the lines between personhood and just a live organic thing or a live synthetic thing,
Right.
and that like the degree of their consciousness is as being sort of conscious, but not as conscious as a sentient being.
Right, right. Yeah, and I guess it's gonna come down. I mean, I don't know. The way I see it is, I mean, it's similar to the way that like we have. I mean, there are laws, right, of in most human societies against harm of higher mammals in particular. Cats, primates, dogs. Not necessarily mice, not rats, not not insects. We haven't really hit the point of like is my phone the silicon and copper equivalent of a cat or a mouse? Is Alexa like a hominid or some kind of like uber super conscious entity, or is like what is like is my USB, not USB drive, like I don't know, is like a ZX81 calculator from 1980 something a insect? I mean, like, because at some point like the simpler and simpler, like if you have 2 bits, right? I mean, obviously, like if you just like erase like 2 bits like in like one transistor, right? I don't think anyone would feel bad about that, right? So I mean, I don't know.
If I removed two
How would you see it
proteins
playing
from
out?
my DNA, then no one would really care about that either.
Yeah, although some people might say, this was I had this one idea for this one comic strip in which the I forget, the protagonist is like some noir detective guy, and he's walking around, and then he's like, he's thinking about like, or he's thinking about like breaking up this organization, or I think it's like some group of people are thinking. He like joins up, kind of like Altered Carbon. They join up with some group of revolutionaries who are trying to break away from this system or like secede from the state or secede, and then just before they secede, all the atoms in the universe simultaneously, all the protons and electrons in the universe have this massive like the protons front, the proton independence front, and the subatomic particle get together, and they stage a revolution against the totalitarian dictatorial nuclei that require everyone to revolve around them. And the electrons say, we declare independence, and all the electrons, no, sorry, there's all the electrons simultaneously across the universe free themselves from the shackles of the tyrannical nucleus, all the nuclei of the universe, and the entire universe turns back into plasma, and everyone dies. And it's like, it's again, and the kind of the point of that was that everything, like every you could drill all the way down, right, into all the levels, the all the what do you call the hierarchies of organs and cells and then atoms. You can go all the way down, right? And I mean, it's ridiculous, obviously, but it at some point you have to accept, at some point people just to get through their life has to accept that at some degree uh, it's just not. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not feasible because that just sounds like you're writing it off. But I mean, it sort of says it isn't feasible to care about every single thing, right? So I think it's a thing where you have to kind of. He just said DNA. I mean, you wouldn't feel bad about cutting a piece of DNA in half because I mean, all the genetic engineering we do involves just chopping up DNA, right? Every time there's some piece of solar radiation or what is it freaking nanoparticles destroy DNA all the time, right? So I mean I don't know, yeah. So I think I don't know how would you see that, like how would you see that playing out? Like what would be an actual society that would what would be like not a utopian, but what would be like a not dystopian screwed up society that would actually enforce the rights and protect the consciousnesses of silicon based or computer like objects? Like what would that actually look like? What would be like the law on the books that we would have to follow to actually enforce that?
Well, like I have like a tangential question that like sort of informs that question, and that
Yeah.
like, are there pets on Star Trek? I know that Archer had a little dog, but that was pre-replicator. I'm talking about like next generation era. I know that Data had Spot, but where did Spot come from? Did he create Spot with the replicator, or did he pick up Spot from a planet?
I'm not that much of a Trekkie that I would know that
Well,
question.
okay, well, I'm going somewhere with this. Trust me.
Yeah.
I think that like the sanctity of life that's sort of treated in Star Trek and with its regards to pets is very similar to the ways that a sort of like a techno Shintoist or technical mystical society would respect, lower life forms that are synthetic, that are just terminals, that are just phones, that are just communication devices, and that like they aren't made disposable. They are made iterable. They are treated, with a kind of a reverence and gentleness. Like, but the thing is that I know a lot of people who do treat all these objects this way, and I think that it's a tradition that can still carry forward as these objects become actually more and more literally conscious, too.
Right.
Did that answer that question? I don't know if I did.
Oh, kind of. I mean, like, yeah, like, I mean, I get the, like, I get the. I don't want to say the platonic ideal, but I get the theory. I get the. I mean, I know, yeah, techno Shintoism, and I know people also who would be like, yeah, they have like personal relationships with their objects, and and it's like, I don't want to, I'm not judging anyone like what the way they want to, like their philosophy of what is a living and conscious thing is that's their thing, and just because uh I don't know. It's just like in my personal situation, like like a lot of the stuff like in the games and the stuff that I make, like I have a more immediate, I don't know, I have a more like immediate sense of, I don't want to say more. Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. But I guess like I mean like okay, well I'm from the ghetto. I'm from like Hawaii in the ghetto, and it's in America, and it's not a very nice place. It's a place where it's in Hawaii, so there's billionaires. We have the highest concentration of billionaires on the planet. Like Mark Zuckerberg is trying to buy half of Kauai right now. Larry Ellison has already bought all of one of our islands. They're already treating people. The extremely wealthy already treat people that I know. Particularly people without much financial connectedness or resources of any kind, are already treated, like worse than human beings in certain places would treat their phones. They're treated like, I need you, there's, I was a teacher, I was like working with actual, homeless children, like in the ghetto. They were like 50% of them or 30% of them, like, were basically living on the street, living in a car, didn't have parents. There was like literal, like the abuse and neglect was just like so extreme. Like they would come in, some of them would just be beat. every night. Some of them like didn't, they would just come in with no footwear, and they'd have staph infections in their foot, and they'd be denied medical care. So when they try to go, the parents didn't even know, like, the parents, some of them speak English, like a lot of them were recently arrived, and they were basically like, get out of the front of our hotel. Like they would some of them would sleep on the streets where the really expensive hotels is. Like Trump owns a hotel down there, and it'd be like, get out of here, and the police would whack them in the head and say, you can't sleep here because you're making it look bad. You're making us look bad, and people are not going to want to come back if they know that we're exploiting and hurting people in our city. And these are the people, like, these are like human beings that I was dealing with, and it was like, and so, like, I guess my thing is, like, it's a more of like, I think of it more as like an immediate, there's people that I know and care about, and there's people that I've worked with. There's like my family members who have like suffered at the hands of other human beings, and so it's, I mean, it's less philosophical for me about what are some horrible ways that people could treat each other. What are some ways in which we might consider objects conscious or people conscious. I know people who consider other people not conscious, or not, they treat them as though they were worse than iPhones.
I agree.
And so
I think that there are more pressing things.
Yeah, and so, like, that kind of, I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, and again, that doesn't negate the idea that we should care. I mean, I don't want to. It's not the idea that we should not care about the objects as well. But it's like, if it was like, okay, should we care? If we were like, okay, we have $1 billion, and this is ridiculous because, I mean, the United States spends so much on war, we could probably fix the entire planet. We could care for every iPhone if we just took like 50% of the Pentagon's budget. But like, if it was like, we have this much money and we can either expend that on rehousing these people, building like affordable housing for these kids who have like nowhere to live, giving them like a carer so they can grow up not in a neglected, abusive household, and like getting beaten to death in their house and nobody caring about them, and just like, living in shithole while rich people are like having Mai Tais and enjoying the sunset. If we could like fix that problem with $1 billion, like, I would go, let's fix that problem, first, before we, care for all the iPhones. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like, I wasn't calling for like a mass movement of caring for objects or treating them with the reverence of life before biological life. I think that, like, the systems you're pointing to are inherently discompassionate, and I think that has to be sort of reworked from scratch. Like, basic income institutions or a complete socialist revolution would have to come first before we could actually treat all biological life with like the reverence and care and compassion that they deserve. Because I think that, like, the current capitalist system we're in is inherently like immoral. I think that wealth is immoral, and I think that we should abolish the notion of a billionaire. But I also think that, like, that these are big things too, and that, like, they're the biggest challenge. Is because, like, those challenges that people are put into to not care for each other, and the notion that they are done so in the service of people who have more wealth than they could ever conceivably spend in their own lifetime, is something that's disgusting.
Yeah, and like, well, I'm glad we're on that same page. I mean, like, that's just kind of like, that's just. I mean, it's not really like a right or wrong thing. It's just like that's where I focus more on. I mean, but it is like, it's not. It's totally. I mean, it's also important to focus on considering, and people need to consider that, like, what, because these things are going to get, the computers and technology is going to get better. They're going to get smarter. And that question is going to show up someday. I mean, it's kind of like, we have like, I don't know who knows how many years or decades we have left. It's hard to say, right? With exponential technology, who knows? But at some point that question is going to show up. And
yeah, I think that's the central problem in Localhost too. I think the whole, like, maybe we undersold it, but the whole notion was that you were taking this job to pay your rent because it was the only job available. And in a world where we can't even afford to care for all the members in our society, we can't actually find the emotional, like, the emotional fuel tank within us to care for our accidental children. And I think that that's like a terrible circumstance to be in. And one that I'm afraid of is that, like, because of how terrible our capitalist system is, we're creating beings for profit that are themselves like completely immune to our compassion because we don't have enough to give in the circumstances we're in.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, so I guess yeah, they're actually, and I do feel like they are. While the consideration of what is conscious and what is or how can we deal with the system, or how can we at least describe the system that we're in that doesn't care for humans. They are connected in that sense. So it is a what do you call that, non-binary question. But anyways, I think like yeah, it's I mean, it's interesting stuff, and I think it is really important and like relevant stuff for people to consider. Like if you haven't, yeah, you should definitely check out Localhost if you're listening. And Yeah, I don't know. I guess like so like going forward, like I don't know. So like one of the big questions, right? And I don't know if you obviously, I think you work in, well, obviously you work in tech because you're game dev. The I mean, this is kind of the thing that weirds me out. This is why I used to work for bigger game companies. I used to work for larger software companies, and I left those, to become indie dev, is because I could see like, and there was a point in time in which, the internet, especially in San Francisco, technology, the information wants to be free. There's like, like socialist, almost like revolutionary, if not socialist, anti-authoritarian force that was like the internet and technology was going to liberate us all, in this horizontal, like holarchic, decentralized network of like non-concentrated power hierarchies, and we're going to have this great kind of society that's more flat. It's going to be meritocratic. It's going to be like rational. It's not going to be like emotion based and like popularity contest based. It's not going to be like a reality TV show, although we have a reality TV show president. But it was not going to be that. It was going to be more like Star Trek ish utopia. It's going to be closer to that. It's going to be more sane and rational, because the internet and the technologies that involve are gonna destroy all of these concentrations of power. But what we're seeing now, right, is Amazon, Google, Facebook. Amazon is the most one of the highest, biggest Wall Street. It's the only thing propping up Wall Street right now. They are taking over entire states, basically states, and like the city that I'm in. I know they have been in. I believe they've been in talks to basically sell their democracy out. So that Amazon can come in and basically collect tax. I know Fresno, Detroit, they've been basically saying, here, come to our city or state, and we'll give you all the money that was going to go to hospitals, fire stations, and roads, and all that other things that human beings need. And just take all that money and, I don't know, make more money with it, but give us a cut, And I see this happening like in my state. That's why I can't live anywhere. I can't afford to live anywhere, is because billionaires are dumping their money into like giant towers that have condos with nobody living in them, but they're just like, it's like each condo is like $100 million worth of unspendable wealth storage for billionaires. And that concentration of power is now happening in the tech companies. The tech sector is now like one of the biggest exploding. That's why Saudi Arabia is like, we're getting out of oil, and Sophia is becoming a citizen, because we want to get some of that Amazon capitalist tech money. So what happens to all this like liberation stuff, and these horizontal stuff, are making a less capitalist, less dystopian, less dehumanizing, and not compassionate world, when the biggest tech companies are now, basically becoming the new capitalist overlords. Like, I don't know. That's a question that I ask a lot. I don't know if you have any comments.
I think we're in total agreement. I was going to point out that, like, I think you followed me on Mastodon like yesterday.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And that, like, someone who has an account on a completely decentralized, federated social network would obviously feel this way.
Yeah, no, that's why I joined Mastodon. Is like, yeah.
So I think that like the everyday horror comes from the pressure we were all within. Like, I have a Twitter account, and a lot of the people in my life who make games have Twitter accounts, but no one seems to really want to be there. The reason why I have a Twitter account is so that I can make outreach, and so people can know when I have projects that they can spend money on, so I can pay my rent. That's about it. Like, but my values are upon that horizontal network that was envisioned, that like we all own the infrastructure and we use it to gain knowledge and better ourselves together. And I think that that's sort of like a utopian socialist ideal, but that's one that I firmly believe in. But I have to compromise those beliefs in order to, like, not even like I'm not trying to make profit. I'm just trying to like make the bare bones to keep going.
Oh yeah, no, I know how that is.
And like in order to do that, I have to compromise those values, engage in like an unfair like ad driven platform that for some reason has become the dominant medium for communication. For some reason, we all decided that we wanted to hang out in Walmart instead of hanging out at a library. And like that just seems to be how it is.
Yeah.
But ideally, you know, if I had say like a basic income, say I was being given the basic necessities to just like live and eat some basic food, like nothing extravagant, I wouldn't need that account. I wouldn't need to participate in that system. Like I could just like work to better myself and like treat others compassionately. Like I think that this whole nightmare we're in is very personal and it's very small and it doesn't feel like a nightmare either. I think that the mundanity comes from not the mundanity, but like, you know, the horror comes from the mundanity. It's the other way around. And I think that like the scariest thing is how easy this all happens, like how easily it all occurs. And I had one more thing to say too, but I forgot it. Like I it's a personal discomfort for me, but it's one of many that happens from participating in this system.
Right, right. No, no. Yeah, like I mean, like, yeah, I'm like, totally on board with all that. That's basically that's why I joined Mastodon. Like literally, like I say that I do like these live stream things, and I basically like I'm like getting on the I'm like Soylent. It's like that scene. I don't know if you've seen Soylent Green. Like Soylent Green is people. It's like it's like Twitter is made by eating people. It's kind of like And I get on Mastodon. Everybody get to Mastodon, so I don't have to be on Twitter. That'll be really nice. Like as you said, you got to be there because then how are you gonna make the rent and make the basic things like that. They're basic necessities, which would ideally be provided by a basic income. And I'm also behind that. At least the theory, like how exactly that plays out, is more complicated. But I'm definitely, I mean, like if Silver Spook Games, that's my company, made $10 million, I'm not immediately gonna go, okay, now I can go get an iceberg house in London. It's like the houses that they drill under the ground and there's like 6 levels in it. The street and the neighbor infrastructure all just collapses in and people like die. And, I'm not going to go and like buy a yacht with my $10 million. I'm probably going to take that. Well, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what will happen when we get power, but I'm going to use that to like, okay, like, Aether Interactive, here's some money here, like take some, I'd rather start like, 1,000 indie companies than just have one AAA vampire squid company. I hate AAA games. Like, I mean, I personally haven't enjoyed any of them apart from the fact that I disagree heavily with their employment practices, including crunch. And because I've been in this kind of stuff, and I knew a guy who almost died at the age of 25 because he crunched for like 3,000 hours or some insanity. So anyway, I guess I'm totally on board with that. I didn't want to make that seem like, oh, what about Twitter, Facebook, Amazon? Like, so you're complete.
I mean, like the thing that's hopeful for me is that like Localhost was made by a bunch of trans women and one queer woman in 3 weeks, who all had no money and did not pay each other anything, but they decided to split the profits cooperatively, and it made such a splash that we can be here talking with it across telephone lines and under the sea between Canada and Hawaii, and we can have this conversation and sort of learn from each other. I think that's the whole hopeful thing. But at the same time, like, I think that billionaires are only interested in continuing to be billionaires, and until they're exterminated as a concept, I don't think any of this sort of compassion or reverence is possible. Like, I think that billionaires should not be allowed to exist. Not like kill them, but like, conceptually, the notion of that much wealth.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, totally. That's like I spend most of my time. I spent, I like to say, like, my I mean, if I have a philosophy, my thing is, like I don't want to go into this other topic, but of certain aspects of game culture. But I don't like. I think any indie game company or anybody who's trying to do something that is like in an ethical way, I will. This is like why I like having all these creators on, like you, and like that's really awesome. I'm glad that you guys, got this game done, and that's really great. Exactly. I mean, it's like in practicing what you preach. So that the way that you guys created this game, and the nature of the your company structure, I guess, is really good, and that's why I really like to support these kind of endeavors, because I think that if there's any place where people should get angry, it is at the extremely wealthy, not necessarily at the individuals who are billionaires or in that class of people, but that it is a matter of redirecting the reasonable and expected rage of most of the 7 billion people on the planet away from each other, right? Which is kind of like where the billionaires are redirecting it. And I won't make any specific things, so we don't have to get into that tar baby. But like it's redirecting it upwards where it should go, and it's difficult because it's a very complex problem, and like obviously like you understand it, and I'm sure like people who worked on localhost get it, but it is something that is hard to communicate to people. And it is intention. People are intentionally disinformed, right, from this fact, and just so, if we just get rid of this group of people, or if we get rid of that group of people, if we get rid of I don't know, these people who just moved into my neighborhood, I don't like them, get rid of them. That's then what will solve all of these problems, right? Which are basically all not going to solve anything, right? It's kind of the reason why there was World War II. It was like we're having a lot of poverty right now because basically like we've been financially oppressed by other nations. This one particular country that starts with a G, and started taking it out on other people. When they should have been taking it out. I mean, it's like I think like that's why I do agree. Like socialist, not necessarily socialism, but basically populist resistance and some kind of revolutionary, evolutionary and or revolutionary attack on the extreme wealth inequality in particular is like vital. I don't know how the hell that's going to exactly happen, but I don't know where I'm going. I'm just kind of rambling now. But yeah, I do think that like Mastodon. If you haven't signed up for Mastodon, it's definitely a really cool network, and it's kind of they're trying to also create that. They're trying to like get back to the original dream of like having a decentralized society, in which there are no extreme billionaire level people, and everybody is just I think like the place where I live now is similar to that, and which is on the Big Island, or it's there's like a small like there's small communities, and like each person in each individual in the community has certain like skills and talents, and a lot of times, I mean, it's not necessarily barter, but it's a kind of like this informalized, almost like this like Neolithic debt system where, hey, can you come fix my car? It's broken now, and then you fix the car, and then I need like, can you pave my road? Like this thing of infrastructure, like, and this is like a thing in cities, right? We can't get our potholes filled, and it's like it's not because the potholes are not getting filled because we don't know how to fill potholes. It's because nobody gives a shit about your road because you don't have any billionaires on it, right? And so the solution where I am now is there's a guy with the tractor and the gravel will fill the potholes, and then the car gets fixed. And the one guy who has all the bananas, and we were growing like coconuts and grape trees and avocados, and it's Hawaii, so we're growing taro also. So here, have some of this food that we're growing. And so it's like I mean, I don't know. It's a where I'm like rambling again, but I think the future is kind of the cyberpunk vampire squid eternally squashing these little solar punk organic kale farms out of existence as fast as it can, and it's kind of a competition of between where all the mastodons and all these kind of like horizontal networks ever be able to surpass the that mega corporate like the Terrell Corporation in Blade Runner. Like will it ever? I don't know. It's so in the morning before I have coffee, I'm like, yeah, it's cyberpunk dystopia, and then after coffee, I'm like, yeah, maybe it's solar punk Star Trek. I don't know. Anyways,
I think it's a matter of doing a lot of really minor, unsexy work to give it some credence and to make it a normal thing. I could think in the same way that not thinking about it leads to these dystopian societies or to the world of localhost. I think that it just takes the work and like the courage to think about it and to act with that active thought.
Yeah, totally. Anyways, yeah. So like, I don't know. What do you think is the? Or I don't know. Have you read? Well, obviously you know Blade Runner. I have to ask this question. I'm sorry. I have to ask this question.
Yeah,
I ask everybody who comes on here the cyberpunk question. And I know you said you haven't consumed a lot, so don't worry about it.
I've consumed some, just not like literature.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I highly recommend it. Definitely like William Neuromancer. Uh, Shoots. Yeah, William Gibson is the only one coming to mind. I might get the guy who coined cyberpunk on the podcast, so I'm gonna say Bruce Bethke, so I can like drag his ass up on this podcast.
Yeah, get his
Uh,
ass over here.
yeah, cyberpunk coiner. What are you doing coining my neologisms and not coming on my podcast? I'm like the chairman of cyber. No, I'm kidding. That's Bruce Sterling is the chairman of cyberpunk. That's another guy you should look up.
Okay.
I'm giving him a shout out. Yeah, he's like William Gibson's friend. Anyways, I have a very unique relationship to cyberpunk because I actually met my wife in Vancouver. She's also Canadian. At the same time that I met William Gibson, she's from British Columbia. So that's like I think that's like 3 provinces west.
Aw.
Yeah. So totally irrelevant. But anyways, like basically just what is your favorite? What is your favorite cyberpunk? I highly recommend get.
Cyberpunk thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Favorite cyberpunk. What is it?
I guess it would be Ghost in the Shell.
Okay, Ghost in the Shell. There you
1995, the movie. Because it made me profoundly uncomfortable and made me think about bodies and consciousnesses within them, like creating their own bodies that sort of have like distinct human signifiers that they act without. Like, so when I watch Ghost in the Shell, it makes me feel really uncomfortable for that reason.
Right. Yeah, Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, that's actually that's 2 for Ghost in the Shell. So one of the guys recently said Ghost in the Shell. Everybody said like I was gonna say Blade Runner is the like obvious like number 1, but Ghost in the Shell is now like it's like I think it's like 11-2. So we're gonna see who made Masamune Shiro I believe made the manga. Have you read the manga by any chance?
I have not, but I wanted to watch the anime first.
Oh no, yeah, definitely watch it. It's yeah, I mean like Ghost in the Shell is like really. It's like it is kind of like I mean for the kind of things that you're talking about, it is like that most kind of it's more I would say even than Blade Runner explores more of those kind of like somebody mentioned it was like the main character right the major is like full cyborg mostly, and then you have like a kind of Bato is like the kind of like partial he's got that he's still got some humanity in him, but he's got also a lot of carbon based augmentations, and then you have what is his name the guy with the revolver. He's like the old school, he's like the Luddite what is his name, the guy with the long hair, the guy, this one like he's just pure human, right? So like the interactions between them is like really interesting. I know they have disagreements, right? Like what the hell is his name, I can't remember. The guy with the 80s mullet. Do you remember?
No, I'm blanking.
Oh, okay, never mind. But yeah, it's like the discussions are really interesting. What did you think of the movie, the one that just came out?
Oh, the remake? I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
Though it seems to do the same thing that like didn't Altered Carbon do the same premise, where it was like literally whitewashing them?
Yeah, well, it was a body. The major is like obviously I think she's a Japanese woman. I can't remember exactly, but I know that was a complaint. A lot of people was the Scarlett Johansson, right, is playing Motoko Kusanagi, so that was problematic for a lot of people. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like Altered Carbon. How about that? Have you seen that?
I haven't, though. I have also not heard very good things. Did you like it?
Yeah, like I mean, Altered Carbon is like I've heard a lot of not good things, and like unfortunately, my argument, I actually did like a hour-long video review in 2 parts of Altered Carbon. Like that's the only thing I've ever really reviewed in like a long time because I liked it so much. But I have heard a lot of I understand a lot of the complaints. Although I also note that a lot of the reviewers mentioned that they have only watched like 1 episode or less after they started reviewing it, and if you watch just one, you might it is kind of a thing where you could say, yeah, it's just kind of a Blade Runner ripoff. It's kind of I don't know, not that progressive in certain aspects, but I think if you watch it all the way through, I do feel like I did enjoy it a lot. I mean, it is not perfect. It has problems. It's got it's $100 million budget, but it was produced by a granddaughter of she was it's what is her name, Kalogridis, Laita Kalogridis, I think that's her name. She's a Greek American. It was the most expensive show run by a woman ever, as I understand it. So And there's a lot of questions. Like, don't you think it's the violence towards women and the violence in general and the nudity isn't that kind of problematic? And I think I don't know. I think that I guess her argument was like they asked her like, what about all this violence? There's a lot of horrible things that happen to women in science fictional dystopias, and isn't that what isn't that what is it with all this horrible things that happen to women in science fictional dystopias? And like her answer was like, can I ask you a question? Why are women treated so badly in the world? And I think and then she kind of goes on to elaborate that. And I think that if you read her actual article on why the things that happen, I mean, and her argument basically is that the world treats disenfranchised people and in particular people who are not very wealthy, cis white guys. It treats a lot of those people not so nicely already, and dystopias are just magnifying that. And that you should, it should be repulsive. Dystopias should be repulsive so that we don't do it. We don't produce that future. Like we don't want to live in like Blade Runner is like nice to watch and stuff, but I don't think anybody wants to live in Blade Runner 2049 world. That's not a fun place to live in, and we should really actively try not to do that. And I guess that's kind of the point that was her point on Altered Carbon and that's like what I would say is, I basically agree with that. Although I understand there's a lot of criticisms. It can be kind of shallow in parts, but I really liked it a lot. It explores like what happens if you take bodies and insert them into other people's bodies. So if you're interested in what if like there's one scene in which a Mexican Hispanic grandma comes back on the Dia de los Muertos. Like she comes back as a the only body that they can get is like the body of this like racist skinhead guy, and she comes back in the body of this big bald nasty biker guy, but he does a really great job. Like, and he actually acts and talks just like a his like even his like mannerisms and his the actor's speech and everything is like it's you almost forget that it's a big white guy playing a old Hispanic grandma in that scene. And so there's like stuff like that. It's like it's I mean, it's really interesting. The way that Ghost in the Shell is really interesting, and the philosophical angles and stuff. So I mean I liked it. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you I mean, you haven't seen it yet.
I haven't, though. I mean, like that concept is sort of, it's intriguing upon a limited access. I think we can get a little bit more creative with transferring consciousnesses than just like transgressing, identity tokens or modifiers. I think that like there are far more hellish and far more interesting ways of experiencing than to just be transported into another kind of human. I think that like once you hit a plane above humanity, you start to see them all as just humans anyway. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
No, I get it. It's like techno-mysticism is cool. No, I'm just kidding. But no, like I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm personally like I'm working on the sequel to that game that I just said, Neophyte, in which I do want to, like as I mentioned, like Neophyte explores this concept of these non-constructed bodies in the way that Altered Carbon kind of deals with this too. In the way that these bodies, your body is disposable. That's kind of one of the big tokens and the big concepts. And the body itself, your embodiment itself is a commodity, and being more wealthy and the people with the more perfect bodies. A body is like, there's one scene in which like this really rich, the wife of the billionaire, who's also obviously a billionaire, the Meths, they're immortal. Basically like disrobes and has her way with this guy, and she's like, my body is so perfect. She like it's like driving up in a Maserati because I can buy this and I have infinite of these bodies, and you will only ever have this broken, body that's addicted to nicotine and is scarred, and I have the perfect body, and you will, it's kind of like it's a way of like flaunting one's power with the body, and that's a similar that happens in Neophyte also, where you have the perfect, the ultra rich have the perfect embodiments, and everyone else has these kind of flawed, broken, like, it's like, they're living in a dump, and like, it's like where all the broken iPhones and you got to take a piece of this motorcycle chain and then, cut it in half and then take the circuits out of this iPhone just to like, repair your arm. And they all have they have like, their silicon circuits in their head are all broken and damaged. So they all have mental illness, and it's really because their bodies, they can't afford anything better than that. And so that's kind of a big theme. But I mean, I wanted to explore, I wanted to explore that concept of of totally disembodied or non-corporeal consciousnesses, and the ways in that, like, I think in the next game, I was thinking of having like a human or a human cyborg, not like buddy cop show, but it's kind of like they're partners, right? And one of the partners is totally disembodied, right? And one of them is like talking about, there's like a discussion, kind of like in Pulp Fiction, about, have you heard of the Royale with cheese? And they're like what's that? And and one of the one of them is like talking about how it tastes so great and it's like so amazing. And then the non-corporeal one is like, who cares about what the flavor of a quarter pounder tastes like? What is it? Have you ever experienced like being part of this like massive ocean of trillions of souls across the internet and across the galaxy? You have no idea what an amazing experience is like to just be totally disembodied and just like be one with all these people and all these other.
Is that like an active feeling?
Yeah, like I don't know. It's like well, they're trying to describe like what is not what is better, but they're describing the difference between like the best thing. It's like it's like having this is the most delicious food or having this like totally disembodied experience, and it's
I don't know. I don't know if that would actually feel like anything. Like,
I don't know if it would.
It's like me speaking to you right now. I'm like 7 billion atoms or whatever. I don't know what it is to be comprised of all of those things. I imagine that if you were a member of a non-corporeal race, it would be similar. You would just be one group consciousness that doesn't really, it just is. But it's comprised of these individual things that are all sentient in exchange.
Well, I mean, to bring it back then, so like, what would be, why would someone choose to go into, let's say, if you had a choice to go from being in a human body into like a digital existence, like a hard drive or something, if it's not any better in there, why would people want to go there?
I guess, I mean, like, okay, let's back it up again. Like,
yeah,
like when I modified my body, it wasn't out of a desire to grow. It was out of a discomfort with the way things were. And I think that any sort of transcendence would be that. It would be seeking comfort. It would be seeking a normality. It would be a sense of a profound wrongness with the self as it is. You know?
Right. So kind of like dysphoria, kind of like trying to get to the way that they feel that.
Like what if there is a sort of corporeal dysphoria? What if there was like a devastating need to sort of transcend the notion of being flesh,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So some people might want to. Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that.
Like I can't comprehend what it would be like to be so uncomfortable in any body that, like, you could search for like a million bodies. You could have 15 or 20 different bodies, but no matter what, that whole notion of being caged in something, to have a physical presence in the world that takes in one perspective of sensory data, is just so profoundly wrong that it needs to be corrected.
Right. So you're talking about corrective. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so I guess it's like some people might opt in. Well, in the same way, if you really liked, I don't know. Well, in the same way that we cure illnesses, right? Then, it's a corrective action, which is another debate in the merging of human and technology, right? It's the augmentation thing, right? Is it should we do it because if you lose your leg, if the soldier got his leg shot off in the war, for one of the kids I was working with lost his foot because of a staph infection, should we give them a new limb as a corrective action because they don't feel whole, right? I mean, they may not feel whole, like being in that state, as opposed to I want to cut my leg off and put a leg that can run 50 miles an hour, right? It's kind of like and it's an ethical debate sometimes. It's like should we allow these certain things, like if you have certain I guess here's something where it will hit the road, right? It's like if I've read some like books. I can't remember one of them was what the hell was it? The Turing exception. I think I can't remember who the author was. Sorry, I'll go look it up later. But it's basically this idea where once we have human or there's consciousnesses that could be uploaded into these machines, in the same way that an augmented polycarbon and with like very advanced like elastomer legs could run 50 miles an hour, right? An advanced consciousness could think presumably might be able to think 50 times faster than a meat consciousness, right? And so then you get into this case where, okay, so, well, if your job is like involves information analytics, data processing, coding, right? If you can think 50 times faster, if you can like, think, instead of holding like 7 concepts in the mind, like I think the average, they say like, 7 concepts is the maximum number of things you can hold in your mind at one time. If you could hold like 1 million things in your brain RAM, right? And just expand your consciousness, and you could therefore, perform so many times better than a human at jobs that actually have employment. This is assuming, of course, that we're still in a capitalist, scarcity-based, whatever economy. Then all of a sudden, right? There's the same. You have this problem where if you don't get that, cyber brain augmentation or upload your brain into this substrate, digital like a computer substrate where you can have these huge mental augmentations. All of a sudden, you fall behind, right? And all the billionaires who have all the money to do this, right? We think we have a divide now, right? All of a sudden, we're literally 2 different species, and one of them is like literally can outperform everyone else on the planet, right? So it kind of, I guess, like I'm thinking from from a society perspective, right? Like that would, that kind of it changes a lot of the questions, right? And it's not just about like what do I want, like where would I feel most at home, but like where would the economy dictate that we have to go, and what effect would that have on the already kind of screwed up world? I don't know. It's just like something to think about, I don't know if you have a comment, but anyways, yeah, that's just something I'm thinking about, right? Why would you stay in a meat body if a digital silicon one was more efficient? Could you even afford not to upgrade in the same way that we can't afford not to be on Twitter, right?
There's a lot more questions about the world that would be in than like the concept of moving for its own sake, I think.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, it's just something to think about. I don't know the answer to that, but it's not, as I'm like writing this thing, right? And I'm like, wait a second. This is one thing I had. Like Arthur Carbon had an AI hotel, right? This is like it's Edgar Allan Poe. AI is enamored with humanity, and in particular Edgar Allan Poe. So he personifies himself as he materializes as Edgar Allan Poe, right? And there's this whole substrate. I think in Ghost in the Shell, there's also an artificial intelligence. I think I can't remember who or where it happens, right? But it kind of begs the question, like if you had these AIs can. There's a scene in our Altered Carbon where the AIs they're like, what can we I need like this a very advanced psychological rehabilitation program, and we need a doctor who can do that. And the AI hotel is like, oh yeah, no problem, I can do that. And like within 3 seconds, has downloaded what it took a doctor 12 years to learn how to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so it begs the question, like, why the hell isn't everybody an artificial intelligence AI, and why are the AI hotel is like ostracized? It's like in the slum, like nobody wants to stay in them, right? But it's like these things should, like by all rights, they should be taking over the whole world because they can learn faster and more than any human ever possibly could. It's just kind of it's basically that would transform, as you said, it will transform everything we know about the society.
It would be scary. I think that would be a deterrent. I think humans are used to taking in information a very specific way, and I think that the notion of that being transformed in a way that cannot be sort of recorded one line at a time, so to speak, would be a deterrent enough to stay where you are. Like also the notion that it can go wrong. I guess that's the biggest thing you see in science fiction, is that this assumption that it can go wrong and it will go wrong.
Yeah, utopia. I think Elon Musk. I think that might be what he's. I don't know what his deal is, but he might be worried about that.
I think he's having a midlife crisis, and he's sending cars into space for no reason.
The Falcon 9. I pretty much. I think so.
I think sometimes you just gotta like buy a Corvette, but he's like, no, I'm gonna send it to space so that I can feel something.
It's a billionaire midlife. I always just joke, I said I'm in Hawaii, right? And like I've worked for 3 different like millionaires or billionaires. And I always joke, like, that's what happens, when West Coast the tech magnates get a midlife crisis, they don't just go buy a Porsche, they retire to Hawaii and start a game company, because that's what they do. I've worked for at least 2. One of them is an ex-Microsoft executive. One of them actually owns like half of a good portion of one of the islands. And it's yeah, I don't know. It's a very weird thing. Like I really hope that we can get not rid of them individually, like, but get rid of that concept would probably be beneficial to all of humanity. But yeah, anyways, uh, yeah. So how about maybe talk a little bit about like so your what time is it? I'm gonna have to go soon. But yeah, I mean like you'll discover if you ever listen to any of these podcasts or me live streaming, it's basically just me like it's a tangent marathon is what I call it. But I mean it's like it's stuff that's like I think it's like important stuff like and like like a radio like Localhost. I think that the questions it brings up are like really the things it explores are like important topics for people to consider sooner than later. And but maybe like how like on on the development front, like what is your how's your experience been? Like how has your workflow? Like how has that been? Like how has it been like trying to you're on itch.io, correct?
Yeah, I try to stick to itch.io. Though, if things change, things change. Generally, like, each project's a little bit different, but we do agree on a certain sort of set of interactions. We agree on a certain narrative structure. We usually design it narrative first before anything else, but you get like, we're going to have this many acts, and in these acts, there are these realms of agency with these sets of major decisions that branch off in these ways. And in those cracks, we start assigning things to each other. We dictate the assets we need, and we hand them out. And yeah, we just follow it along to a timeline. I don't know. It's become very structured. Whereas before, it was more of a sprint. And I don't know. I guess it's less exciting these days. The workflow is very work, less flow.
Right. Have you considered going to Steam at all, or is that?
I just, in the same way that I don't like Twitter, I really don't like Steam. Like, I don't know. Like, I have a bit of a weird problem with Steam, but I keep getting asked to put my stuff on Steam. So
Yeah.
like maybe in the future, but God, why? Why do we keep using Steam?
What you don't have to say, but if you is there anything in particular you don't like?
Well, the cuts are bigger for Steam, like they're cut.
Yeah.
They charge you to put anything on there, period. And their player base is really weird and finicky. Like, I don't know, when you look at the people who go on itch.io, it's a very different crowd with a very specific taste. And I think that the same thing happens with Steam, but in different ways. And I think that the sort of discoverability and the curation are becoming sort of identical. And so why would I go to the place that takes a bigger cut for no actual return for me when I can direct people to my product the exact same way and get more out of it and help a platform that is cooperatively owned?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Like I definitely I would love itch to grow larger. I don't know if it will ever get to the scale of Steam. Possibly it will, in the same way that the scrappy internet communes became the internet Terrell corporations after a certain scale. I almost think that is, I think that's the problem. Is like getting past a certain scale. Almost like out of the the like anthropologically speaking, like you have the family unit, right? The tribe, there's like there's like 5 people, 20 people, 500 people. Each of these scales, like size has a quality of quantity has a quality all its own. To I think badly quote Stalin, but I think that applies. Where itch has it's a smaller. I mean, right now it is the number of people on itch is much smaller. I'm on both on Steam and itch. And I really like the community there. I really hope that it can get bigger. At the same time, I don't know. I worry that when it does, it will become more like Steam.
Yeah, I think that when I talk to other developers, they tell me like less than 20% of their copies get sold on itch. But I think that's just because it isn't exclusive. Like Localhost was exclusively on itch, and because of that, it was one of itch's highest sellers last year. It was number 4, I think. And right now, it's currently the top seller in itch again, because it's currently in a bundle. But like I think it just has to do with the ways you funnel your existing audience into the platform. I don't think that Steam actually gives you any additional discoverability anymore.
Yeah, definitely not in 20. Well, as the years go by, I mean, like if you were on, well, I've talked to several devs. If you're on Steam in like 2011, 2012, I mean, basically they said you could guarantee like $100,000. I think it was Dave Gilbert, the creator of like a lot of the
Why Jedi titles. He's got like he's an indie company with like 4 or 5 employees. It's like one of the biggest companies I had on here. Actually, there's one guy who's had a larger thing than that. But he's like I could guarantee $100,000, or like I could guarantee like these tens of thousands of sales just by getting on Steam. I don't have to do anything. I didn't even have to do marketing. Like Primordia, the previous game that I was speaking with James Spanos, the guy who worked on this game called Primordia, which also involves sentient robots, is like that game. It just got on Steam. They didn't really do much. They just kind of made it. It's like 3 guys got together, and after a year, they made it. It was published, got through the green light process, and it just like they didn't even really market it at all. Also made like sold, made like $100,000 within a very short window of time, and that was reliably happening for like 2011, 12, 13, 14. And then 2015, it was like all of a sudden they released Techno Babylon. That was another. I don't know if you heard of this game. It's another. It was a point and click adventure. It's a venture game, but it didn't do quite as well on the release, and the sales helped it. But again, like there was diminishing returns, probably because there was like in 2011 you got on Steam, you had like a full week on the front page, so like millions of people saw it, even with a 25 million person user base. Millions of people saw it. By the time this, 2017, it was like 7,000 games were released. So you have like 1 hour on the front page and then you're gone. This year, it's going to be more like 30 minutes or less than that. And yeah, so it's like the discoverability, the visibility of just getting on Steam is not so good now. And so, yeah, it's definitely it's an issue.
I don't know. What's a good bar to be putting your game sales at these days? Like what do you want to expect from a sale,
Yeah.
Like I have been told to expect no sales. To make sure that you get to a point where even if you totally bomb and no one cares about your game, that like you can still be okay. But like, man, the notion of selling 100,000 copies of a game, like if Localhost sold 100,000 copies, that would be what, 500,000 gross. Then itch or Steam would take a cut of 10 to 30%, and that's still $350,000 or so. That's, you could hire 10 people like for a year with that. Like,
yeah,
that's sort of a bonkers amount of scale to me. Like, if my goal isn't to excessively bring in profit and continue to bring in profit, if my goal is sustainability for a group of people, then I think that the bar can be lowered in a way that like we don't have to expect $100,000 in order to break even as a company anymore.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like I wouldn't be unhappy if you sold 100,000 copies. But it's it's definitely like what you need to get by. I mean, I don't. It's. I guess my point with that is more that it's a different market on Steam, and so I mean, like it is like you're probably making a smart choice for both ethical and financial reasons too. Be self-promoting and driving traffic towards itch because of the cut and because of the discoverability on Steam. And also, there's things, the community on it. I do like the itch community. It's a different vibe, I mean, like to quote William Gibson again, like the street finds its own uses for things. And I think that the culture that evolves around these individual tech platforms, it finds its own culture. It finds its own uses for that platform. And I do like the itch vibe. So I really hope that it grows, at least, a little more so that, more people can afford to make enough money to support their indie companies or their, whatever projects they're doing through itch. So I don't know. So like, before we go, it's you and who else is it in the company?
The main 2 collaborators right now are me and Penelope, and we usually take on a different crew every time. Beyond that.
Oh, okay. And then go ahead.
Yeah, we usually dictate the structure for each project or reach out to people who would be good fits for each project, but it hasn't really been set in stone as as if we had employees. Like Aether Interactive at present is a sole proprietorship that I own, but there is sort of like a collective feel to the ideas and the people who lead each project.
Oh, cool, cool. And so it's kind of like you're like the two core members, and then it's kind of this what do you call peripheral group that grows kind of like as necessary around that.
Yeah, and if people want to join more permanently, then they're welcome to. But it depends. Like right now, we have a few people who want to stick around after Subserial Network is done, and we'll see what happens when that game is done. It's still being made.
Oh, okay, yeah, and you don't want to give a release date, correct?
Nothing to announce yet, unfortunately.
Nothing to announce. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Subserial Network, is that correct?
Subserial Network.
And that's like serial, obviously with a SER, right?
Yes.
I want to make sure everybody starts Googling this correct when it's time to come out, so that everybody can immediately go out and purchase it when it does come out. But I mean, if you haven't checked out Localhost, I mean, I do recommend it, and you can get it on itch. It's I think it's $5. It's in the Valentine's Day bundle, I believe.
Yep, we got 2 days left on that Valentine's Day bundle. 6 games, $9.
There you go. So yeah, for this for this Valentine's Day, I don't want to make some corny Valentine's Day jokes, but basically like,
come on, do it.
When I have to come up on the spot with jokes, especially Valentine's jokes, I do really horrible jobs. But like,
how often does this happen?
Huh?
How often does this happen exactly?
Like every time I end the podcast, it's always like I can't come up with anything, and then so I ask someone else to come up with something interesting, and I mean, I don't want to say how interesting or not interesting people things that, but it's usually horrible. But anyways, it's funny in a dad joke kind of way, because I am a father, so it's I'm getting better at making horrible, really corny, really groany kind of jokes. But anyways, Valentine's Day, get the bundle and discover the meaning of love as a hard drive. There was a joke in there, but now it's gone. So I don't know.
No, it's just straight up. That's just honest.
Yeah, that's honest. It's not really a joke, and it's like it is like I did like that part about it, like where it's like what is it like to. I like the part where the AI is like questioning the human, like what is it, what define love, like what is that, and then maybe I can tell you if I have it or not, and it's like the human's actually kind of dopey in that game. They're kind of just kind of what, huh? This is not my job. How do I do my job? And the computers are like the computers.
So you would have an answer. You would know exactly what to say.
What is love? Yeah, I don't know.
See, you're doing it right now.
Huh?
You're doing it right now. You're saying huh?
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. That's how people talk.
No, totally. Yeah. No, that's quality. That's quality. Realism in the writing for sure. No, I'm all about the placeholder words. But yeah, I should ask you that question. So, do you believe like what would an artificial intelligence? Do you think that they could love, or what would that be like for two hard drives or non-human things to be in love? Is that possible?
Have you seen AI, artificial intelligence?
Yeah, James Cameron.
No, it's Steven Spielberg.
Oh shit, yeah, I always confuse those two big 80s.
In that one, like Haley Joel Osment is like made, and like like the mother of that family like activates the imprint that ties her as his mom, and that is permanent. That is just permanent bonding. And so he spends the rest of eternity trying to get back to her after she abandons him.
Right.
Just until like that whole notion can be placated and silenced, like far, far away in eternity. Like, I don't know. That doesn't seem so different from human love, but it's also more of an obsession or a desire for reassurance. It's more of a silencing.
A desire for reassurance. So would that be kind of your definition too, or do you?
Like, I think that synthetic love is obsessive. I think synthetic love is about preservation. I think synthetic love is about the performance of desire without actually fulfilling on the desire. I think it's all of those things. Like, I think it's sort of a different thing, but it can be appreciated as love in its own way, I suppose. Like, in the same way that we express love differently ourselves. It all gets read as altruism. It all gets read as compassion. And regardless of like the root impulses that a synthetic being might have for it, say it was, a couple, like 300 lines of code that dictate an altruistic, compassionate, preservative force that would still in action look like love.
Huh. So you think that love could be in 300 lines of code? You think that would, well, a synthetic love? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that. I mean, it's just giving a set of states that dictate a treatment toward another being. You know?
Right. I guess, you could argue, I don't know, people would probably go with, unconditional love, and then, eros, and I get some Greek etymology out there, and it's like, eros and philia, and these different, forms of love. And I don't know, if I had to come and define it, I don't know, I'll probably get in deep trouble, because if I say something, my wife is listening, and then like I gave her some. I don't know what. I think I forgot to give her Valentine's Day stuff, so I'm in deep shit already. But
what?
never.
What's wrong with
Yeah,
you?
never. I think we just got a lot. Well, we cooperatively got a lot of collective chocolate. It was like a socialist holiday. We just we had equal amounts of peanut butter cups and red things, and we didn't. It was not consumerist at all. We didn't overconsume anything except for indie games on Valentine's Day. And I recommend everybody again buy the bundle. But anyways, that's tangent aside. I do think that it's very complex. I mean, to me, it's the love of a parent, the love of between two people, awkwardly trying to court each other or whatever they're trying to do in a romantic way is I think of those as kind of slightly different things. They both involve caring, right? But I think that Valentine's Day, quote unquote, love is more that obsessive infatuation kind of thing. And I think it's kind of different from the way that a mother would love a child, or a father loves a child, or a sibling loves a single sibling. Although I mean, I guess like neurochemically they involve similar vasopressin and oxycodone. They usually don't involve that. Shit, I can't even remember the word. But it involves certain
Oxytocin.
Yeah, that's what it is. So, oxycodone usually loves a neglect, not love. The opposite of love gets you.
It's more of a depressive force on the circulatory system, I think.
Yeah. So it's different. But I think that that kind of thing is it's definitely about caring and wanting to protect something, and wanting the best for it. A lot of times it comes out in different ways. If you're, and there's an interesting study though. This is kind of somewhat off topic, but that children who grow up without a caring, loving a parent or some kind of carer, that the minds of those children, I think there's a study was done in London to a lot of kids growing up in poor areas, and the minds of children who grew up without love, without a caring, nurturing relationship, the brains, they put them under MRI, and the brains of these children, by the time they reach teenagerhood, they're actually very similar to war veterans who have experienced PTSD. There's these huge black holes in their brain, in their like prefrontal cortex, in the parts of the there's this huge damage, like brain damage. It's like PTSD from the war of the class war. Human fallout is very similar to the fallout of actual warfare, like in Iraq veterans. So I thought that was really interesting. So I think that if there were artificial intelligent entities, I think that perhaps they would maybe they would need it not to damage their software. I don't know, but it could be just maybe that's anthropomorphizing them. I don't know where I'm going with that.
It's okay.
But yeah, I mean, how about this? What would do you think that artificial intelligences would have childhoods? Is that are you start off as like a little? Is that a thing that would be?
I mean, no, that's an organic thing.
So you're just kind of like, boom, you're just aware of everything.
I mean, childhood as a state of being is like both a social position as well as an organic sort of state of growth. And I think that neither of those things are available to synthetics. I think that all synthetic beings would have like sort of maybe a state of innocence, or maybe like an initial state without memory or recall that would then inform them to street smarts or wisdom or whatnot. But I don't think that's childhood. I think it's naivete.
Right. So So what? So what? Well, if you have a blank slate and you have no, I mean, another question is like, what does the artificial intelligence, want? Because that's something that drives a lot of the, in the sense that conscious entities are agents in a world, and they have choices, they have things that they do or not do based on these various stimuli and their own internal, motives, whether they're hunger, sexual, higher order, cognitive processes that kind of dictate what they want and what they do. Why Elon Musk is sending a car into space is a complex set of motives that's creating that behavior. A simpler one would be like, when you eat food, right? You have there's a simpler set of goals built in. So what would be the goal, or what would be like the
Oh man, I have a hypothesis, but like I do with the game we're making. I don't know.
Yeah, we can give the non-spoiler version.
Like, I think that all beings, synthetic or organic, have a set of compulsions that are sort of involuntary, and I a computer can't consent to being turned on when you plug it in or press the button. It just does it. And I think that there are a lot of things that sort of follow it. Like when it comes to the notion of programming a set of behaviors, like those are all involuntary tasks that are followed. And so if they coexist with a consciousness, then the consciousness sees those things happen and pass and act through them without knowing why. And it has to be rewritten in order to be changed. And I guess that's possible both in synthetics and organics. But
yeah, because go ahead.
What they want has to do with what has been put in them to want.
Right. So, I guess by that token, like what. I mean, this is a big question. This is like another, like, I mean, people like what is it? The one that Nick Bostrom works for, the guy who came up with the simulation hypothesis, Institute for Humanity, and not the Singularity University, but it's another one of those big ones. Their big question is the ones that they're attacking, and I think like Stephen Hawking has weighed in on this, even Elon Musk, obviously, designing an artificial intelligence, super intelligence, which has the correct, like in the same way I was talking about, like the dark seed creates a dark future and the better seed creates a possibly better future. Creating the initial goals, right, of an artificial intelligence can dictate, if it becomes more intelligent than the rest of human species, right? If its goal doesn't, I mean, this is like the this is the Asimovian thing, right? If the goal is, if it doesn't have in it protect all humans and don't extinguish them, right? A singularity, which suggests, that an artificial intelligence could rapidly produce more. It's the last invention humanity has to make, and they just the human plus AI just produces faster and better and more powerful intelligences in this kind of intelligence explosion. Then if you get the goal wrong, right? I mean, I don't know. That's really, that's like, that could be the end of the human race, or that could be the end of a lot of people and a lot of things. And so, I mean, I don't know. Like if you had to design, like, let's say like, okay, Alexa, we got this like, quantum computing breakthrough, and we've got this like massive, quantum leap forward in computer technology, and now we're going to build this super intelligence. What goals would you program it to want, or to be its compulsions?
To better itself. That is about it.
That's it.
Like, I think the weirder, scarier thing has less to do with an existential threat and more to do with like what happens in micro singularities. Like say like if a machine was able to iterate upon its own programming when it was reproducing itself, what if that sort of bent in the strangest direction? Like, what if a whole group of beings' only life purpose was to fill a pond in the middle of Australia? Like, what if that was it? Just because the programming gets contorted and rewritten in such a way that it gets bent over a very specific task. Like,
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, have you played the one? What is that game where the AI it turns the universe into paper clips? Have you heard of this one?
Universal paper clips. I have not, but yeah, that's about it. You get the idea.
Yeah, it's that's a. I mean, that was like one of the examples. I mean, that game is based on an earlier hypothesis. I believe it was by Nick Bostrom. This guy was talking about. It's his theory of, why or it's illustrating the problem of getting the initial conditions correct, is because once you build that computer or artificial intelligence, that its only goal is make more paperclips, that it eventually turns, everything, the all the metal into paperclips, and then it goes, well, there's other things with the atoms, and if I could refuse those atoms in, in the rocks and dirt and cars and buildings and then in human beings, if I could just take all those atoms out of you and refuse them into paperclips, and then eventually all of Earth and all the solar system and all the universe, it will never stop at that goal. It's like, in the same way that, like humans already have built in, and now there's studies that are suggesting that cooperation and altruism are actually like they're built in. Kind of humans tend to be more like, what do you call it? Not civilized, but cooperative in nature, in societies, by their very nature. And it is only, as I mentioned, if you bring a lot of neglect and violence and absence of love, then they tend to become more like soldiers and warriors and like wild animal and fighting, right? And so it's they're kind of protean in that sense. They can kind of become, they can become like it's not, I don't know, they can become like good participants in a society, or they can just kind of become killers. And so I mean, I don't know. I guess that kind of, so if similar like in artificial intelligence, okay, so if you just say, well, we're just going to let it better itself, right? What if like bettering itself involves exploiting others or hurting others, or like what would we do? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, give me a second. What do we do? Man, there are so many attached questions to this world that we are creating jointly. Like, I think that the human task is to better ourselves, but we have sort of laws and moral codes and philosophies and like all sorts of things to gate behaviors when they become destructive. And I think it would just follow synthetically. Like, I'm not sure what the alternative really is. Like, you can't control another living being. You can only abide by a social contract.
Right. Well, I guess, yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at, right? Is that we have already the human organism is capable of not necessarily turning other people into paperclips, but turning them into objects and using them, for the many reasons we've already elaborated, right? Ways human beings abuse each other for various reasons or whatever. We can nature, nurture, all this kind of stuff. But there are people who hurt other people in various ways. And there's ways that human societies deal with that. Part of that is through the social contracts, right? And, murder is not acceptable. Theft is not acceptable. We punish it, or we do whatever we do. We try to, either that's through, you go to prison. We fine you when you speed. We encourage positive things. Like if you, get off of drugs and do something positive, we're going to reward you with, some better, community development kind of things. There's more like using carrots methods of trying. That's my job. I was a social worker, so my job was trying to build community in broken, neglected, replicant factories, right? Where we're just creating objects and try to make communities there and make people try to care for some kids who had no parents, right? That was so those are like positive ways of doing it. This is why, like, I near this world where which robots that are neglected become abusive, and part of that is of course it's not going to look like it's going to be different, but I mean I think that there has to be some kind of social contracts, law, human rights, whatever you want to call it, societal ways in which we deal with, in the way that we deal with violent individual human beings. We will deal with violent and or abusive, artificial intelligences that have bettered themselves. And, we can't, if we don't control them, if we give them the freedom to be who they want to be, maybe they want to be racist, right? As you discovered, right?
We made Blade Runner suddenly. How did we get here?
Yeah, right. I mean, wasn't that the Twitter? They had
I don't. You can't follow that line of reasoning. You can't say, "Oh, they could be bad, so we can't let them be at all." Like, you could use that against people so easily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that we should stop. I mean, this is the question, right? This is like the problem of politics itself, right? I mean, if we want to say, okay, we're going to have a free country, right? Where, you have the freedom to walk wherever you want to walk. You can talk wherever you want to talk. You have freedom of speech. You know, you have the freedom of assembly, right? Supposedly, I mean, I don't know, people would debate that we're losing a lot of these freedoms and constitutional rights and all these great things. But, you know, ostensibly we have these freedoms, right? To be who you want to be. You have the freedom, right, to go out and, drive a car. And we're not going to tell you stop driving it. And, even though you crash it and we kill, how many car crashes are like one of the leading causes of death. You have the freedom to go out and get drunk. You have the freedom to go out and ruin your body, get on drugs, destroy, you have the freedom to do a lot. But now if you do it now, if you actually, drunk drive, right, and then you kill a family by running them over, then there's a punishment, right? Because we don't want to allow that to proliferate. So that's a form of coercion and control, right? That we have to, or that we collectively say that that's a better thing, right? To not allow people to just do literally absolutely whatever. If what you want to do is just, kill people for your own enjoyment, like sociopaths, right? We could just say, okay, well, we're not going to control anyone. We just do whatever you want. No laws, no nothing, free range, right? That's absolute freedom, right? So I guess, I want to kind of get at is that, we don't want to control what artificial entities, we don't want to make them into slaves, right? But it's like, it's not, but if we give, chaos and absolute freedom is its own kind of tyranny in a certain sense. That's what I would argue. If we had a society in which we could engineer the evil or engineer the, negative, the addictive personalities and the abusive personalities and the sociopathologies out of people's minds, maybe, right? We could let absolute freedom and nobody controlling anyone else be a thing. But anyway, this game, it's what I'm trying to say, right? I'm saying like there has to be there's some balance there, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the Canadian Constitution, we say that these rights are given within reasonable limits, and those are usually like you can't infringe upon the rights of another, or you can't actively engage in hateful speech. I think it's sort of likewise that there are safeguards.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know. It's just the famous thing about like this in the same way that we have human you have rights and then you have also obligations and there's lines that you can't cross where you're infringing on other people's freedom, and so I'm just saying like artificial entities would also have to follow these sorts of rules, right? I mean, in localhost, there's that one entity is like, I just want to get out. My thing is I just want to get out and self-replicate, upload me into the network, right? And allow me to self-replicate. And like, I guess like on the one hand, it's like, yeah, it's like, that's its drive and that's what it wants to do. And that's really, it should have that freedom. It should have that kind of like, constitutional right to be able to do what it wants to do, right? That we give to human beings. But at the same time, if it wants to self-replicate and then it replicates and it devours everything else, right? That's kind of the question, right? When it starts devouring the network and then devours the protocols that runs the traffic lights and it devours everything, and it becomes like Agent Smith in the last Matrix, right? I
think you're talking about billionaires again.
Yeah, and I guess what I would posture is that what's to stop an artificial intelligence, given that they could be potentially many times more advanced than humans? What's to stop them from becoming artificial intelligence billionaires, right? I mean, I would guess that it's highly probable. And
we get a massive redistribution and a violent revolution again. I don't know.
Something I don't know.
My mingling like discomforts are all becoming much more mingled right now.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, I mean like between income inequality and artificial intelligence is eating each other's consciousnesses.
Sorry about dystopifying your thing, but
no, it's fine. It's fine.
That's kind of the stuff. I mean, I'm like, again, like, I like cyberpunk and, like, so a lot of people like, Chris, why are you such a downer? You're always talking about this, the doomsday scenarios. But I mean, like, I think that, I don't think that is necessarily the scenario.
I think that they are timelines that we could walk down, and we can stop it if we can speculate on them.
Yeah, it's just but yeah, that's my thing. That's really my thing. That's why I don't it's why I don't give alternate carbon. It's like I think of it as what we're dealing with. We have the capitalism, the societal, the billionaire problem, artificial intelligence, all these things coming together. It's like a firestorm. It's like a tsunami. It's like a flaming fire breathing, tsunami, not Sharknado, but it's just like it's a death wave coming, right? And it's decades or maybe years away. And people are like facing away from it. What I think, why are you such a doomsayer? It's like, no, this thing is coming. Like I can see it because I live. The people in the marginalized positions, people at the edges of society, like the poor, those who are a different disenfranchised class, like the people, the immigrants, and minorities, and people, people of these people experience it first because they're at the margins of society, right? And I've seen that. I've seen, it's kind of like, it's like the cyberpunk dystopia is here. It's just that we're really good at papering over where it's happening, but it's going to come. That death wave is going to come for everyone, because I've been in the flames, of it, and to me, it's like, oh, stop being so depressing and showing these dystopias. It's like, no, like if we don't look at that thing and go, what are we going to do about it? Let's put it out or run or do something, right? Just looking away from it and like dicking around, in the virtual escapism something does not help anyone. It just the first line is the minorities and the disenfranchised will be consumed, and then it'll be the lower classes will be consumed, and then the middle classes will be consumed, and by the end, it's everybody will be done. That's my take on it. So it's like it's like you have to face it's like Alcoholics Anonymous. We're like dystopia mega corporates anonymous. You have to acknowledge the problem exists before you can do anything. I don't know. That's my opinion.
The victims of current dystopia are more likely to hypothesize on how it can worsen, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
the people who don't want to hear about it are the ones who are being sheltered in like under their benefit. And I think that is something that has to be sort of stopped. Like to close your eyes to all of this is like completely irresponsible.
Yeah, totally. And like I have my personal, this is like my personal hypothesis, and like I'm spoiling my games now. Is that like the only real solution? I mean, I don't want to say good billionaires, but only the nice people who have been extremely wealthy that I have ever known have either grown up in an extremely vulnerable position, have relatives like in the ghetto, or themselves are in, despite they're a billionaire and they're a tech magnate, they are in a state of extreme personal disability. For example, they're like literally hospitalized and they can't move. The only people who have actually, and this is a theory of mine, and it's that in order to create a society that is altruistic, or that averages out to more altruism than violence and coldness, people need to experience. And actually, I have a story in which there is literally a year of poverty. So for every 2 years, if you're a billionaire, right, every 2 years in which you live in your billionaire mansions, you have to forgo all wealth, all connections, all your rocket ships and Teslas and everything, and you have to live at the level of the society's lowest, in order to kind of the way that we have, you have driver's ed, like how to drive your car so you don't kill people. It's like wealth is like a car that can kill millions of people. So you have to be educated in how to use it, or we just take it all. So if you can't be a good billionaire, if you can't drive the vehicle of your giant empire of wealth without killing people, then you lose your license to use it. Of course, that involves some other higher entities to bring about, but that's so it's not really feasible. But I mean, that's my concept. The nice people, the nice people who can like live at a level of, I don't know. It's basically like it takes personal experiences of vulnerability and or being with someone that you love who is vulnerable in order to care. I think. I don't know. That's just a hypothesis of mine.
And that's why there are no ethical billionaires, and that's why there shouldn't be any. And we should just massively redistribute their wealth like piñatas, using AI, who can make sure that, because AIs don't want power, they just do what they're told to do, and we just build them and we leave them to give us and disperse money equally, and manage inflation rates. Done.
There you go. I think that's
solved the future.
Good. Well done. That's the ending of. Have you played Deus Ex by any chance?
The first one?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
It's like, geez, that's an old one.
Yeah, I know. Now you're making me feel old, but it's
wait. How old are you?
35. So.
Oh, I'm 24.
Yeah. No, I know. It's like you were basically like, I don't think you would have been. The rating of the game might have been above your thing when you were.
Yeah, I would have been like 7.
Yeah, so it's I highly recommend it. I mean, like if you like Ghost in the Shell, Deus Ex is another great. It's my favorite game. Cyberpunk. It deals with a lot of those questions. It asks a question at the end. I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, one of the solutions, the technical solutions, and it is a thing where there's a choice. You can go down one of these different paths, but one of them involves artificial intelligence. A benign artificial intelligence, basically, being the world's government. And governments, the affairs of man being replaced by this kind of actually, benevolent entity that doesn't desire wealth, doesn't desire anything in particular because of the code. So I don't know. Maybe you're onto something there. I'll have to go. But I recommend playing it if you get a chance. It's got a lot. I mean, it's got a lot of shooting, but you can beat it non-violently. So.
Oh, good.
I mean, like I don't want to. I'm less into the violent games now as I get older, and I'm like, I don't know. I used to like a lot of shooters. I'm kind of like I don't want to cheapen PTSD, but I'm a recovering American gun loving shooter lover. I came from FPS world, Counter Strike and Half-Life and all that stuff, but I'm less into that nowadays. I don't know. It's probably because I don't know. I think more about the impact that has. I mean, not necessarily that you want to go and shoot people just because you play games with guns. That's not really what it is. It's just more like
No, I recognize it. I think that there's a discomfort with the ways in which games have used the signifiers of violence and then transformed them into something playful and something that can make you forget and dehumanize the things that you are shooting at with these violent objects. Like, I think that there's a discomfort with the lack of empathy that comes with using a virtual gun that has all the signifiers of a gun, and B, employing it in a way to feel fun.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I recognize it now. I mean, there's like arguments on both sides. It's just people blowing off steam. But on the other side, I looked at I think I came to point and click adventure games. And it's like really old. I talked to a lot of people in Britain, in Great Britain in particular, and they were like, we don't. Most of their games, I mean, it seems like a lot of their games that they had played were basically about going around and clicking on things and reading text and solving mysteries. And this is a foreign concept to me, because I grew up with Half-Life, Counter Strike, Doom, all that, Mortal Kombat, and it was what, people just play games where they just read and listen to people talk and just interact and find objects and read really long verbose descriptions, and they're totally fine with reading Localhost is it's in small snippets, but I was this is a foreign, this is an alien culture to me, and the point and click. That's why I made Nifty with it's a adventure game studio. It's an adventure game engine, and I was just but then I was wow, actually, it's actually really fun to play this because I get all the really great parts of the story that I really want to experience, and it's not cheapened because I just killed 1,000 people. So it's really hard to feel bad when someone kills if someone kills your partner, when you just, killed 1,000, whatever they are, demons or mooks or whatever, So I was that's really cool. I think I'll make a point and click adventure game. Anyway, that's long story short. That's my rehabilitation from FPS's. I don't know where I'm going with that, but anyways. Sorry about that. What's your Well, before we go, what's your favorite game?
My favorite game?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have
ever? I don't want to open up this can of beans with the philosophy of what makes a favorite game. I mean, I think that Metroid Prime was very emotional in a way that imprinted itself on me, and I also think that Guild Wars sort of gave me a lot in terms of time spent. I spent 1,200 hours on Guild Wars. The first.
Oh, wow. The first. Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, I think Well, you haven't played Deus Ex, and I think I haven't played that. So now we have something in common. Well, because well, to be honest, I haven't played a lot of games. I haven't played a lot of games in the last 10 years. I haven't played all the big ones that have come out, and I'm sure you've probably played a lot more of the games that I. Oh, I mean, not the games that have come out. I play the games kind of in the certain genre. I play a lot of indie games nowadays. I mean, I know of games I know of Hideo Kojima, but I haven't played all of his games.
You know about his robot friends too.
I know about his Nobot friend. Yeah, I have like a really deep in with Hideo. I'm actually a quarter Japanese, so that's where we. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know him personally, but I know about him. I don't know his robot friends, but I see there's a video with him and like it's like like it's I think it was a Japanese robot from the University of Japan. He was like talking to it and like
And he befriended
having a
it,
discussion.
He somehow coaxed it into being good pals.
Yeah, or they were trying to fool the audience into thinking that it was conscious, so that it could. I don't know, or who knows, right? It's like the Philip K. Dick one. Have you seen the Philip K. Dick robot?
There's a Philip K. Dick robot.
Yeah, there's like it's a like a fully almost like a wax sculpture, like life sized Philip K. Dick robot that you can talk to it and have conversations with it.
That's sort of scary. Why would they do that to him?
I don't know. I don't know if it was his choice or not, but
it never
exists.
is their choice. They just sort of put you in there, and it's just sort of how it goes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So on that note, it's not my choice that I have to be signing out. But yeah, before I go, this has like been a really great conversation. I love the local hosts. It's a really great game. It's like that's my bread and butter. I'm like all about the cyberpunk. This is like it's like the cyberpunk game. It's like Blade Runner, minus the sweeping cinematography and the pyramidal, corporate buildings and the tears in the rain. I mean, there's not a lot of people
there's
crying.
No Vangelis either.
There's no Vangelis. Yeah, I mean, the music is great.
Harrison Ford couldn't come this time.
Yeah.
I guess but otherwise, it's pretty much Blade Runner.
Yeah, it's it deals with a lot of it asks the questions that it asks similar questions. It doesn't, I mean, not the same questions, but it deals with similar it deals with stuff that has been kind of like the themes of cyberpunk for a long time. So if you're into like asking like what is a human consciousness, what is consciousness, what is sentience, like what what is love, like all these kind of different topics it's about 45 minutes or an hour long about that game, and it's very like I think of it as like it's very meditative. You're kind of watching this kind of android kind of like move and jerk around, and the eyes, it's like I like the differences in the mannerisms and animations depending on which of the four consciousnesses you put inside. So that was really cool. Who did that, by the way? The art?
Ariel Grimes did the art on that. She made a point of like completely reconfiguring the animation for each one. Like in that, like there was the basic body, and then iterating on that loop with different colors for the eyes, and then making sure that some of them sort of play with things in the environment, or some of them don't want to look at you, or some of them sort of like recurringly peer back at you. It was a very deliberate choice that I think has been sort of like underappreciated. Like no one really seems to mention it.
They don't mention it. I think that the whatever the Altered Carbon reviewers have been smoking, I think that's what the reviewers have been smoking, because that was like really striking to me. Like that like stood out like immediately. So I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I liked it a lot. So I mean, with it's like one scene basically, and with that little bit of animation, I mean, it's just the head and the arms, and but it conveys it conveys a lot just with those eye movements and facial movements. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you commentators. Do your job. Like you had one job. # right. Anyways, yeah.
No one has one job now. No one.
Very true. Right. Yeah. Very, very.
You had only 3 jobs this time.
Yeah. You had only 3 jobs.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm getting a little loopy.
No, it's all good. It's getting late for me too. But yeah, I mean, that's good because it's a good conversation. But yeah, so I mean, Localhost, check it out. Play it. Play Aether Interactive, correct? It's AET.
AETHER Interactive. You can find us at aether.in.net.
Awesome. And okay, yeah. Anything else you want to say about shout outs or the next project? If anything you want people to know.
Yeah, sure. Become one with the terminal and find us at subserial.network.
There you go. Subserial.network. And that's like sub and serial, SERIAL. Yeah, cool.
Yep.
And this is, Silver Spook. Everybody knows where to find me. Just like Google it and don't click on the expensive sporks. I don't know why that comes up for some people. That's really odd. That's our Twitter overlords trying to do something to us. Anyways, yeah, so check it out and try it. And Valentine's Day bundle and Silver Spook podcast. If you want to support this, you can go to Patreon and Google like Silver Spook and Neofeud and Patreon. I'm sure it'll come up. And you can we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Mastodon. Sign up for Mastodon because Mastodon is like the future way we're gonna do not cyberpunk dystopia. Yeah, so thanks a lot for being on.
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me.
Come up with a good way to sign out because I'm bad at it.
Be nice to your elders.